Okay, so this is actually going to be one of the more interesting videos in this series. And I just want to make a quick mention, I do apologize for the quality of the mic. I will be going back to my regular recording setup after this series. It just happens of circumstance. So these heads were in extremely bad condition. This was the most difficult part of this entire rebuild. As I've mentioned several times before, this tractor sat out for a long time. I don't know exactly how long, but however long it takes diesel to turn completely black into sludge. The fuel lines, I mean, there's really, like, how do you clean this stuff? There was really no way to dissolve it. The fuel lines were clogged solid. I was having to run hard welding wire through them to try to clean them out. And there's just, I'm still struggling a little bit with that with the injectors. But anyways, I'll mention again the best source for information about any of this Yanmar rebuild or refurbishing or any work to this model of Yanmar tractor. You're going to want to go to Matt's shop on YouTube, and I'll leave the link in the description. You can check out his series. He's got all the technical information. It's much better. This is just sort of complimentary to go along with that to give maybe some other information. I don't entirely remember what sort of condition his heads were in, but I assure you these ones were in far worse condition. So let's just kind of get into this. And I'm just starting off by organizing. So as you've maybe seen in previous videos, I do have the head stamped for push rods, or maybe that was the case. I stamped for push rods. Um, I did also have some stamps in the heads that I put some numbers on, and then I pulled the valves out to keep the valves so that they go back in the same valve guide, essentially, same port that they came out of. And I got my valve spring compressor here, which you can do this without a valve spring compressor. If you're really in a pinch, you cut the edge of a socket out, and then you have to have the magnet kind of ready there, and you can pound on it. You can pound on the socket with a hammer and catch the keyways out of there with a magnet. If you're not too familiar with how these come apart, there's just little keepers on the inside of the top of the valve spring retainer. So when you compress that down, you use a magnet to pull those keepers out of there, and then you can push the valve out from the bottom. There's a seal in there, which you'll see a little bit later in the reassembly. And yeah, there is a way to do that without a valve spring compressor. So you may have seen in the previous video how corroded. Unfortunately, I didn't put any pictures of that in this video. These valves and the valve seats and the valve stems, everything, there was just tons and tons of moisture that sat in the intake and the exhaust on this for a very long time, several years, and everything was extremely corroded and pitted. It was orange peel. It was completely orange peel all of the surface. Some of the valves were worse than others. One of them was extremely bad, and you're not gonna. Unfortunately, this photo doesn't really do it justice. This was probably even one of the better ones. You can see a little bit of how bad they were. It really doesn't do it justice. They were in extremely poor condition. So here I'm using a steel wire wheel, my die grinder, to clean this up a little bit. And you really should be using the brass ones, but you know, I don't know. It's arguable. I'm I've been doing it for, a while now, and I've never really seen it give me that any problems, but I think you're supposed to use the brass ones. They just don't work as well. So now this is my little trick here. Uh, I didn't even bother with using the, I don't know what you call that, the hand lapping tool, the little suction cup that'll go on the face of the valve. And that's how you're supposed to lap valves. but these were in such poor condition that I used about a half a tube of lapping compound and a drill. And this was me just trying it out to see how long it was going to take me and how well this trick worked by using a drill and then clamping it to the valve stem and then pulling back with lapping compound. And it worked. So I used a little bit of you'll see I used a little bit of WD-40 and a bit here to test it, to test for leaks. You want something light like gas or WD-40 or water would work, but lighter is going to give you a better a lighter fluid is going to give you a better idea of how well it's actually sealed. So I like WD-40 for that. And then I just pull up on it, squirt some WD-40 in the port, and see how much, if any, comes out. And I was making progress. You could definitely tell I was making progress, but I knew this was going to take a lot of time. I spent several hours actually doing this, as you'll see in a second here. I got myself a little setup, got comfortable, because I was sending this for a long haul. And yeah, I just, this was my little routine. And I would, you don't want to put too much heat into these. You don't want these like, warping. So I would kind of pulse it. And then I would switch to another valve and I would pulse it. I would change directions. And you just don't want to pull super hard on this and just go, 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 because it's going to put a ton of heat into it and it could warp it. Or, maybe the material could lose some of its, strength properties. So just trying to keep it cool and, back and forth, keep it even, and, then switch to the next valve, clean it up, test it, switch to the next valve. And then I went back through these probably about 3 times by the time I was done. This took, like I said, several hours to do all this. This, I think, was my first go at it. You can see there's still quite a bit of pitting in there. There was a good edge on this still. There was no knife edge, right? Like it wasn't cupped out. These valves are still in good shape, except for the fact that they were just extremely corroded. So, I could have, I guess, possibly got the valve seats cut. And, I tried looking for new valves. It just wasn't happening. So I couldn't find any. I could find a head that came with a set of valves and springs and all brand new everything, but I could not seem to find, at least on eBay when I was looking. There might be now. Maybe I was just having, had a little bit of bad luck. But this seemed to work pretty well. By the time I was done, it all sealed really well. The tractor runs really great now. The only trouble I'm really having with it is the injectors are still a little gummed up from all that crap that was in the fuel lines. But it's actually working most of it out of there, so it's sounding pretty good. It's just kind of a little bit on startup. There's a little bit of knocking still. So this is Reassembly, and you want to use some assembly lube on Reassembly. You can see I put the valve guide seal, new valve guide seals in there. If your valve guide seals go, or if you tear those valve guide seals on Reassembly, you're going to get a ton of smoking, and because the oil is going to come through there and go straight into the cylinder and come out as smoke. I've actually got a truck right now that has bad valve guide seals. Great truck. Burns a ton of oil. Other than that, but I mean, it's just in great condition. So these are the rockers. You can see, I just showed you how the orientation of those was. So they toe inwards. And again, everything was put in baggies so that I matched them up properly.